Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Leslie Holland. I'm the UW Extension for Crops Pathologist, and today for our 2021 Cold Climate Grape Grow webinar, we will be having our guest speaker, Dr. Peter Larbi, who's an extension specialist from UC Davis, and he's going to be presenting on calibrating a sprayer. Peter Larbi has been an assistant cooperative extension specialist in agricultural application engineering with the University of California, Division of Ag and Natural Resources since 2008, and also is a faculty member in the Department of Biological and Agricultural Engineering at UC Davis. He's based at the Kearney Ag Center in Parlier, California, and as a part of his research and extension program, he's focused on developing and promoting best practices for safe, economical, and environmentally sound pesticide application with reduced environmental risk. Before his appointment at UC Davis, he was previously an assistant professor of Ag Systems Technology at Arkansas State, with a joint appointment with the Division of Agriculture at the University of Arkansas. He was a postdoctoral scholar at the Washington State University, as well as the University of Florida. And before that, he earned his PhD in agricultural and biological engineering from the University of Florida. He received his bachelor's and master's in Kumasi, Ghana. So with that, Dr. Larbi, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, all right. With that introduction, I wouldn't want to go over again, but I just want to emphasize that in my position, I provide leadership in regional leadership in the area of spray application engineering for specialty crop, looking at almonds, pistachios, grape, citrus, and stone fruit. And I'm happy to be presenting to you today on calibrating a sprayer. And the focus of this presentation is on air blast sprayers, which are the most common types of sprayers used in grapes and also across the tree crop industries. So the spray application basically is the spreading on of a liquid to a target in the form of spray. And in this case, our target is the vine canopy. We want to apply pesticide or other crop products from the tank of the sprayer to the target canopy. And as we do apply to the canopy, there are three outcomes that we expect. First is canopy deposition, which is the on-target deposition, that is the spray reaching and remaining on the target. Then we have drift loss, which is the spray missing the target canopy and ending up in the air where it is carried from offsite to unintended locations. And then we also have ground loss, which is loss of the spray directly to the ground in the application site. And here are some three scenarios that I want to quickly touch on. In this first scenario, we have a maximized canopy deposition, whereas drift loss and ground loss are minimized. We can also have another situation where canopy deposition is reduced compared to the first scenario, and ground loss and drift loss are increased, and another scenario where you have fairly increased ground loss and drift loss, whereas the on-target canopy deposition is reduced. Now, these represent typical outcomes or typical scenarios that one may get from an application. The first one is our desired outcome. We want to increase the deposition to the deposition on the target. We do not want to, it is not just a matter of applying the spray to the ground area, but we want to ensure that the spray that is applied is going to the target and remaining on the target. So that is an objective that we look for in spray application. And here are some considerations for good spray application. I'm focusing on the sprayer part. We need a well-maintained sprayer to begin with. A well-maintained sprayer where all components are functioning the way they are supposed to function, and it's performing the way it's supposed to perform. Beyond that, we need the sprayer to be well calibrated, accurately calibrated, so that we know what the sprayer is putting out. We can beat our chest and say this is exactly what the sprayer is delivering. So we know where how much spray is being delivered per unit area. And then also in that calibration, we also adjust the sprayer to the target canopy. So we need a well-adjusted sprayer, and these will all help ensure that the application would lean towards an effective one. With all these, we also need the sprayer to be well operated. I'm going to skip the other considerations. So having set that rolling, I would move on and talk about sprayer calibration and start off with a definition. So sprayer calibration is basically the adjustments made to the sprayer based on measurements taken to ensure that the correct amount of material is applied. And so in the process of calibrating a sprayer, we do some measurements, and also we do some adjustments. The end result that we expect is that the sprayer is delivering a certain volume per area, and also not just only that, but that the spray is being directed to the target canopy so that we can maximize the on-target deposition. So why do we calibrate? Why do we calibrate? First and foremost, overall calibration is considered a best practice in spray application because through calibration, we're able to tell exactly what our sprayer is doing, and it would be able to measure out quantities of pesticide or quantities of the chemical that we are applying more accurately. When sprayer calibration is done correctly, it is a sure way to know how much material you'll be applying to your crop. And in correct calibration or not calibrating at all can result in inaccurate application rate. It can also end up with an ineffective application, and potentially you can have illegal residues on the treated crop. So it is important for us to calibrate our sprays. An accurate calibration will lead to effective pest control while minimizing waste and negative human health and environmental impact. And I mentioned accurate application, not just calibrating the sprayer to deliver a particular volume per area, but also including all the adjustments that will optimize the application. And then also calibration ensures compliance with the law as represented in the pesticide label. The next is to consider when we need to calibrate. And basically for a crop like grape, where you have a season where at the beginning of the season you have, the crop has no foliage, and then over the course of the season, the foliage is going to develop over time from no foliage to full foliage. It is ideal to calibrate at the beginning of the growing season for the canopy condition as it is, and then in the course of the season, as the canopy goes through changes in terms of foliage, canopy size and foliage density, it is important to also calibrate for the certain stages of the canopy, so that the sprayer can be adjusted to the well adjusted to the canopy to lead to a more effective application. Some of the changes that can occur, I've mentioned the changes in the target condition, as in the canopy size and canopy foliage density. Also, when you are moving from one vineyard design to another vineyard design where there is significant differences in the canopy profile, it is important to calibrate and make necessary adjustments for the different situations. And also, whenever there is a change in ground condition, if you are moving from one block to another block where the ground condition is different, potentially this is going to affect the true ground speed. So it is important to verify the ground speed at the selected speed setting, so that we can use that, factor that in the calculation to determine the exact volume of spray that will be delivered per area. And so for different stages, different points, it may not be necessary to go through a full calibration, but components that are affected by changes in the target condition would need to be verified, measured, and adjusted to the present canopy condition in order to improve the effectiveness. So, for instance, if only ground condition has changed, then only travel speed will have to be determined again, and so forth. Now, the fundamental concept in calibration is that we want to determine the application rate, which is basically defined as the volume of spray or volume of liquid discharge per area covered. So volume of spray discharged over the area on which that spray is discharged. We can see it in different from different perspectives. So here, volume applied per area covered. We can also look at it as sprayer output, which is the total flow rate from all the nozzles, all open nozzles that are applying spray, times a given time, divided by swath width, where in this case our swath width would be row spacing in the vineyard, times travel speed, times the same time under consideration. And this can also be simply looked at as sprayer output or flow rate, overall flow rate over area rate or land rate. That is the rate of coverage of the application area. And the same fundamental concept can be applied to various types of sprayers. You deliver a certain volume, you are delivering that volume over a certain area, and you determine the volume per area, which is the application rate. Here are some steps involved, and depending on the literature, you may find this, different steps, but the components, the components that are measured are the same or similar, and the outcome are expected to be the same or similar. So the steps that I go by, that I present here are these. So the first step is to determine the travel speed, measure that and have that documented. The next is to assess air profile of the sprayer to determine the number of nozzles that will be needed to apply the spray to the particular canopy characteristics or the particular canopy profile. And then based on the number of nozzles selected, based on our determination of the number of nozzles needed per side of the sprayer to deliver the spray, would select the appropriate nozzle sizes to deliver the spray to the canopy. But just selecting the nozzles doesn't mean that we know how much is being delivered. We make references in nozzle catalogs, but the values provided in the nozzle catalogs are not always what we tend to measure. So it is important to measure from different nozzles to determine the actual sprayer output. And then based on that actual sprayer output, we would also find what the application rate is. So then is the application rate within what we intend to apply? Yes or no? That will lead to adjustments that would result in the correct or the appropriate application rate for our application. And then once all these steps have been completed, it is also important to assess spray coverage and make necessary adjustments if needed. So here are different ways that we can measure the ground speed based on different numbers of people available. In the first example here, we have 3 people involved. We have an operator, one person indicating the start time, and another person recording the time and also documenting the speed. So you place 2 flags to cover a particular distance of travel. 100 feet or 200 feet are typical that we can use. So one person stands by the flag, the starting flag, and the sprayer travel across the distance. The first person observing the start will lower the hand to indicate that the sprayer has reached that point, and then the person recording would start recording time and end the time when the sprayer has reached the ending flag. Now, a good practice is to identify a fixed point on this tractor sprayer combination, and use that same fixed point to do the to measure, indicate the start, and the same fixed point to indicate the end. So let's say the front of the tractor is selected as a fixed point. When that front of the tractor reaches the first flag, that is when the time measurement starts, and the time measurement ends when that same point reaches the end of the ending. The end of that distance, which is the ending flag. Here is another example where only two people are involved. You can place that flag in the path of the sprayer, and observe when the front of the tractor touches the flag, and that becomes the starting point to the point to start measuring time. And also when the front of the sprayer reaches touches the last flag, would be when the time would be stopped. Another method is to use the number of trees passed, and in this case, I would like to emphasize that considering this setting, the first tree is always tree 0, because we are making use of the spaces between the tree, and assuming that the tree spacing is consistent, we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as in our example here. So the first vine in this case is considered 0. So the number of trees passed would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times the vine spacing to give us the distance covered, and then the rest follows similarly. We can also work with automatic GPS tracking, which is not affected by ground traction, and that would also give us good estimate of the speed of travel. So here is just a quick demonstration of measuring the distance of travel. And here we are just using a measuring tape to do that measurement. But as I've mentioned, you can also look at the vine spacing and use that to do that measurement, and with the assumption that the vine spacing is consistent. Okay. So you can place flags at the end, and I always recommend placing multiple flags so that it's easy to see when the front of the tractor reaches the flag. So multiple flags to indicate a line, and rather than using just a single flag. So this is just a demonstration of the measurement. Okay. Okay. All right. So I mentioned that the swath width is a row spacing, and if this is already known, you can use what is documented. Otherwise, you'd have to measure from the trunk line to the trunk line to obtain an accurate measurement. And this is just a quick demonstration of that. From trunk line to indicate the row spacing. So next is checking the air profile. What we do is we can tie ribbons. We can also call it flagging tapes to all potential nozzles per side, and then place the sprayer in the vineyard and just run it in a fixed position with just the air on. So this will give an indication of where the spray would be going, where the spray from each of the nozzles would be heading, and that would give you an idea of which nozzles would actually be applying spray to the target, and which nozzles will just be spraying into the air or to the ground. And the objective is to avoid any nozzle that is just spraying into the air, because just into the air means that you are missing the target, and that is going to contribute to drift. Just to the ground is also just wasteful. So the idea is to based on the air profile, identify which nozzles will apply the spray to the target, and then use that information to turn off the nozzles that are just going to waste the product, and keep the nozzles that would actually apply to the target on. So based on that process, we come up with the number of nozzles that we are going to use per side. So let's say in this case, I can see 2 nozzles needed to apply to this target, even though this is this particular case does not show an actual canopy that we are applying. But you can see this photo and this other photo. There's a top one and the bottom one showing a full canopy with full foliage. Obviously, the number of nozzles needed for the first case should be different from the number of nozzles used in the second case. And gallons per minute from that is the sprayer output. That is the total flow rate from the nozzles would be GPA, which is the gallons per acre, which is what you would find on the you find on the pesticide label, gallons per acre times MPH is the speed that you have determined by measuring, and then row spacing is your row spacing in the vineyard divided by 495. This will give you flow rate from both sides of the sprayer, and then to find the number of the flow rate from a single nozzle, you would divide that value by the total number of nozzles from both sides, and that will give you the flow rate for a single nozzle. If you're also considering just a single side, GPM per side, this would be the value to use. It's basically divided by 2 to give us 990 instead of the 495 here. And this is going to give you the gallons per minute per side of the sprayer. So that way you divide that value by the total number of nozzles, open nozzles per side, and that will give you the same value flow rate from a single nozzle. So this is demonstrating the how to tie the flagging tapes to the nozzles to assess the air profile. Okay. So when you're done, you can see where the each of the nozzles would be pointing to, and that gives you an idea. So over the course of the season, you'd have to do this to know which nozzles to be on, to leave on, and which nozzles to turn off. And again, you don't want to waste the product. All right. There are various ways to also to adjust the air volume, because I did not mention this earlier, but the air plays a significant role in the application. The air volume and the air speed work together to transport your spray, the spray produced by the nozzles, from the sprayer to the target. And it is sufficient that the air will carry the spray to the target and not beyond, because beyond the target, the spray that is carried beyond the target would contribute to spray drift. That is the spray being carried by the wind away from the target site to unintended locations. And we know what the implications are. Most sprayers have a high and low settings on the sprayer. So these can be used. You can use a low air setting for earlier in the season, where you don't need as much air, and then use a high setting for when you have full foliage and you need penetration. There are some techniques that have been used that have been proposed in the literature, like the Cornell donut, to reduce the air intake and thereby reduce the volume of air that is being used in applying the spray. These can be assessed and adopted to help improve or optimize the spray application. Another way to adjust air is by increasing travel speed. So using a higher travel speed at the earlier in the season when you don't need much air, and then using much lower travel speeds to produce more air, because the flow rate from the nozzle and the flow rate of the air work similarly. The faster you travel, the less volume you discharge per unit distance. So if you travel faster, the application rate reduces because you are covering more ground, but you are discharging less. So it applies to both air and liquid. So the travel speed can be used to adjust the air, but everything would need to be considered or assessed by eventually looking at the effect on coverage. So once we have determined the number of nozzles needed, and we have also identified, once we have determined the number of nozzles needed, the next thing is to select nozzles. Okay, so let's say we have two nozzles, open nozzles per side, or let's say 3 open nozzles per side, or let's say 4 open nozzles per side. Now we know the flow rate that we need to discharge or to apply the spray. You would consider the the operating pressure that you are going to use in applying the spray, and then you go to the nozzle catalog for the type of nozzle that you are going to use. So let's say that in this example here, we want to use 100 psi, and we are looking at, let's say, 0.4 gallons per minute flow rate from each nozzle. So this will lead us down this column to look for a nozzle that would fit that flow rate. So I just said 0.4. This nozzle will give us 0.387, which is close, or 0.467, which is also close. But the closest in this case is 0.387 at 100 psi, and this would be the this is an air induction nozzle, the purple here. So that is what you would select in this case. So it's similar for hollow cone, disc core nozzles. Depending on the operating, you use the operating pressure to select which column, and then you would look for the flow rate, and or the closest flow rate to the flow rate that you have determined, the nozzle flow rate needed to apply the spray at the target application rate, and then you follow that row to select the particular nozzle you would be using in applying the spray. But I can tell you that these tabulated flow rates would not always be achieved in your application. So it's after selecting the nozzle and placing the nozzle, it is important to now measure the actual flow rate from the nozzles so that you can use that to obtain the actual application rate that you would be obtaining from your application. So there are a number of ways to measure that flow rate from the sprayer, from the nozzles. One method is just to pack the sprayer on a level ground, fill the tank to overflowing, or to a given mark that you can see in the tank, and then run the sprayer in that fixed position, start spraying and stop after a determined time, and then see how much was sprayed out. How to see that is to use a bucket, a graduated bucket, to fill the water back into the tank up to that initial mark, and the volume that you fill back up is the volume that was actually sprayed out. So in this particular method, you are looking at the overall sprayer output and not looking at individual nozzles. The other method is filling the sprayer to about half the tank and running the sprayer in the same fixed position, and then using the measuring pitcher to measure spray from each nozzle, and over 60 seconds, which is 1 minute, and then dividing that volume in ounces by 128 to give you the gallons per minute. Okay. And then once you obtain that, you can put everything together to obtain the total sprayer output. So there are this another method. Method 3 is using using a spray calibrator. This one is from a Spot On from IndoQuest Incorporated, and it automatically gives you the flow rate in gallons per minute and in other units. Here, back to method 2, using the pitcher, you would need the pitcher and also a stopwatch to measure the volume and then the time, and then use the calculator to do the calculation. So there are more components involved. This one is already pre-calibrated and gives you the value instantaneously. There are two probes in the column, and the system measures the time it takes from one probe to the next probe, and then does a computation, gives you the value. So it's a quicker way to do it. And then there are other methods that I do not want to go into it for lack of time. But it is also important to check your pressure, check the operating pressure, because that the operating pressure also determines the flow rates, the flow from the nozzle, and you have to make sure that your pressure gauge is in operation, is functioning, and that it's giving accurate values, because that is what the operator would be using to determine if the the operator will be selecting the operating pressure to determine how what volumes of spray will be discharged and what application rate will be attained. So it's important to make sure that the pressure gauge is functioning, and that that is going to give you a good output during the application. So here are some quick demonstrations of using the different methods that I showed. This is a spray calibrator that gives you an instantaneous measurement of the flow from each nozzle, and you can catch the flow by using 1 inch clear tubing. You can trim it off from the inside, and it fits easily on the nozzle tip. It fits easily on it, and you can use that to catch. There are other methods, but any type of tubing that can help you catch the spray so that you can measure it will be a good one to use. So this is showing the instantaneous flow rate measured by the calibrator. Okay. And this is also showing the method of using the pitcher, the timer, and also a calculator at the end to do the calculation. I'm sorry, the formula shown here is incorrect. The formula on the right side is actually correct, but this gallons per minute is actually the flow rate. Now let me backtrack. I think I have made a mistake. This is correct. The gallons per minute per nozzle is what we are measuring, which is flow rate. You have the volume in ounces divided by 128, and that gives you directly the value in gallons per minute. I'm sorry for that confusion. This is correct. Okay. So once we have the application, rates. We can also we have the flow rate. We can obtain the application rate by using these formulas. GPA is the application rate. For the two sides, we have GPM, which is the total flow rate from all the nozzles from two sides, times 495 divided by the speed, travel speed in miles per hour, and times row spacing as the denominator. And this will give you the gallons per acre. So all the values in the denominator remaining the same, your flow rate would determine what your gallons per acre would be. And I want you to see that these two formulas are pretty much the same. The difference is whether you are doing the measurements based on flow rate from all the nozzles from both sides, or flow rate from nozzles on one side. So once we determine the application rate, we can tell if the application rate is off, if it is more or less, and determine and decide on the adjustments we need to make. There are two ways to adjust the application rate. One is to adjust it based on the travel speed. And this is a formula that can be used. This is the desired travel speed, what would give us the application rate we are looking for. This is the application rate that was measured based on the flow rate that we just measured using either a measuring pitcher or a spray calibrator. And then this is the speed that we have measured, divided by the gallons per acre, the application rate that we actually wanted, our target application rate, our desired application rate. So if you put in the numbers, this is going to give you what the value actually needs to be to obtain that application rate. And here is an example where the desired application rate is 100 gallons per acre at 2 miles per hour, but we measured 110 gallons per acre. If you put in these values, the adjustment that is needed is changing the speed from 2 miles per hour to 2.2 miles per hour in order to obtain the exact desired application rate. And then once we make that adjustment, we maintain that adjustment for the actual application. The other method is using pressure, adjusting it based on operating pressure. And this is the desired pressure, that is what we want to change it to obtain our application, the desired application rate. So here the trick is that there are some squares involved, so you have to pay attention to the squares in order to get it right. The gallons per minute desired to obtain the gallons per acre, which is the application rate, times the pressure measured, that is the initial pressure that was measured to obtain that, and this is the measured flow rate from the nozzle, the flow rate, the total flow rate from all the nozzles. This is the total flow rate with the sprayer output that we desire to obtain the application rate, and this is the what we have measured. So putting what you have measured, putting what you desire, putting the pressure you have measured, and you would obtain the adjusted pressure that you need to obtain the desired application rate. So here is the example. We have 2.424 gallons per minute at 160 psi to get an application rate of 100 gallons per acre. But this is what we actually measured. So if we put in the values right, it says instead of 160 psi, You can change this to 166.53. We can adjust this to 166 or 167 to obtain something that is more closer to what we want to achieve. And then we maintain the settings for the application. So I would like to stop at some point for the sake of time, but I just wanted to show these two decision support tools that we are developing in our lab. The first one is basically what I'm going to quickly mention, but for the sake of time, I wouldn't get into that, but I can share that with Leslie, and for your exploration. It's a Ebla spray planner, which provides decision support, helps with calculations for calibration, and I'm going to leave that alone, and would also want to leave behind some of the important spray definitions that I wanted to talk about. But I just want to say that at the end of the day, it is not what you're applying to your gallons per acre that matters. It is really what you end up getting on your target, which matters. And so it's to ensure that you have achieved that. We can use water sensitive cards, place these in different locations in your target canopy, run the spray as you would after you have done the calibration and so forth, and see where your spray is reaching, and use that information to adjust make some adjustments and achieve best outcome. I'm going to skip all of these and stop at this point for any questions. I would like to address any questions. These are some examples of using water sensitive cards to obtain some information, useful information for adjusting the sprayer settings. I'll stop at this point and would entertain any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, I welcome folks to enter questions into the Q&A or the chat. We already have a couple questions that came in, I think, before the start of your presentation. Maybe some instruction on about cleaning the sprayer tank lines and spray heads. Any recommendations for that, Peter?
Let me see. Step-by-step instructions to thoroughly clean a sprayer tank lines and sprayers. I would not go much into it, but I can make recommendations of resources that you can use. There is Sprayer 101. It's a website which has all sort of what do you call it? Information on Ebla sprayers, and I can look for the website to show you, but I do not have specific recommendations here, but I think there is so much resource available in that. Let me write it here. This is Sprayer 101, and you can search that on Google, and it will lead you to the website. It's a very useful resource that I would recommend that you go there for that purpose.
And it sounds like you can send me those links, Peter, that you posted.
I can do
slide.
that.
That'd be great, and then I can make those available on the Fruit News website. Additionally, this talk will be posted on the Wisconsin Fruit News YouTube channel. And I've got that posted in the chat for all to see. So just check that probably sometime next week, and that should be uploaded. There's also a poll up. If I could have participants, I see a couple folks have already participated, but if the rest of the folks on would mind submitting some answers to our poll, that would be great. And other questions for Peter? We still have some time.
Okay.
Peter, maybe I'll throw in a quick question then. Since we're dealing with a bit of a colder climate here, I'm thinking about calibrating and just kind of getting prepared for spring. Are there any other kind of special precautions or advice that you might have to our growers here? Because it does get a lot colder, like will nozzles clog more often, or are there just certain temperatures that maybe you need to replace your nozzles more often, or anything like that kind of related to cold weather that growers here might need to be aware
of? I think basically for the sprayer, when you are ending the season and all those things, I mean, there are recommendations for winterizing the sprayer and making sure that the sprayer remains functional at the beginning of the season. But it is also important to take care of the sprayer, to maintain the sprayer. There are different components, sieves and screens at the nozzle and then in the plumbing line that are meant to reduce clogging by sieving off debris in the tank content. These would need to be removed from time to time and cleaned out so that there is easy flow of the content through the plumbing. Otherwise, what tends to happen is that they become closed. The volume that is allowed reduces. And then because of that, the nozzles can tend to deliver less spray than they are supposed to deliver. And then also, when that happens, I mean, it affects the flow rate. And so even though your pressure may be all right, the flow rate will not be all right. So it's important to make sure that the screens and sieves are clean and that there is easy flow of the liquid to make sure that you have your spray, being measured correctly.
Great, thank you. That makes sense. Any other questions? I'm looking at the Q&A and the chat. Make sure I haven't missed anything. We have a question come up from John. What if I'm not using an air blast sprayer? Do you have other suggestions? Maybe perhaps I'm thinking smaller than that would be backpack or just any other type of smaller spray equipment. Since we're dealing with smaller acreage.
Okay, so yes, with backpack sprayer and other types of sprayers, I mentioned that the main idea behind the fundamental concept of sprayer calibration is similar. You have volume being applied to a particular area, and your purpose is to find what that volume per area is. My only recommendation is that it pays. My advice is that it really pays to do to calibrate the sprayer so that you really know what is given out. There are various ways to do that, and for the sake of time, I cannot get into that. But I say that there are various ways to do that, and whatever it takes to get it done, it would pay off eventually because of the cost of the product. You do not want to waste the product. You want to retain as much as possible on your target so that it will do what it's supposed to do. Sometimes, we will spray and end up, spraying amiss in the sense that the spray does not end up on the target, and the spray ends up at other places. But using the appropriate adjustments, doing the calibration, and adjusting the sprayer to match the canopy or the target canopy, I think that would go a long way in minimizing the losses and making the application more effective. And this cuts across all sprayers.
Excellent. Well, I think we are a minute after 2 o'clock. So I will make sure I receive the links from Peter and make those available to everyone, as well as this talk will be available again on our Wisconsin Fruit News YouTube channel. Otherwise, thank you all for attending, and thank you, Peter, for sharing this information on sprayer calibration with all of us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, I'll end the poll too. Sorry about that, Annie.
So I will be sharing the links with you, Leslie.
That sounds great. Thank you. Sorry, there's construction going on. So, Annie, is it okay if I stop the recording?
Yep, go ahead and just end the meeting and the recording will stop. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.